Hi, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this week's ISE webinar. Today, we're going to be talking about sustainable recruitment, a really interesting subject, I think, that is important very much to our industry. I've got a great selection of panelists that I'll introduce you to in a minute. Just give you a quick idea of how our webinars work if you haven't joined one before. My name is Steve Ishwood. I'm Chief Exec of the ISE, and I'll act as host for the webinar. We would love participation from you as an audience. I'm going to do a little bit of a poll with you very shortly after we've done introductions. If you've got any questions as we go through the webinar, please drop them into the questions dialog box. Obviously, we have so many people joining these webinars, it's very difficult to actually have everybody's voice on, but please drop those questions into the box. I'll prompt you as we go through. If we can deal with the questions as we go through, we will, but also we leave some time at the end to answer questions. So let's crack on. Let's introduce the panel first of all. I'll go around as I can see you all on my screen. Andrew, would you like to go first and introduce yourself?
Let me just demute myself. Yes, good afternoon, everybody. Nice to see you all again. My name is Andrew Baird. I'm Director of Consulting at Blackbridge Communications, and I'm here this afternoon in my capacity as a joint founder of the Sustainable Recruitment Alliance, of which there will be much more later.
Thank you. Andrew. Laura, would you like to go next?
Hello, I'm Laura Yates. I'm Head of Graduate Talent at the law firm Clifford, and I am also the co-founder of the Sustainable Recruitment Alliance.
Thank you, Laura. Akil, would you like to go next?
Hi everyone, my name is Akil Kapasi. I'm with a charity called Students Organising for Sustainability, and I'm our Ethical Supply Chain Coordinator.
And we've also got one of Akil's colleagues joining us, Meg, is having a few technical issues. So we just rejigged the agenda slightly. So hopefully you'll see and hear from Meg a bit later. But last but no means least, Joe, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, I am Joe. I'm 18. I just finished year 13 in my A-levels, and I'm on a gap year currently, and I'm waiting for of sustainability or campaign Teach the Future.
Cool, thanks, Joe. When you come back on, Joe, your voice is a little bit broken up, so maybe we'll turn your webcam off a bit later, but we'll see what that's like when we do your session a bit later. Okay, so that's our panelists. Let's get cracking to the subject matter. We thought it would be an interesting idea to do a little bit of poll and see what you all thought as an audience before we get into the content here. So I've got some questions here. Now, this is the very first time I've done this, so let's see how well it works. So the first question we've got is, how important is environmental sustainability to recruiters? So those of you who are employers, or those of you who work with employers and recruiters, tell us what you think. So we want to know, how important is environmental sustainability to recruiters? Very important, important, not important, or irrelevant. So if you can click on what you think there. I've not done this before. I don't know if you can all see the numbers. So it's changing a little bit as we go along. So nobody's saying it's irrelevant. So that's a very good thing. Fair percentage saying it's actually not important to recruiters. So that's nearly a fifth. The majority answer is important, and then a quarter saying that it's very important to some recruiters. So, and that's our first question. Let me go to the next question. So I closed that one. And so the next question is, do you have a view on how important sustainability is to candidates, to students who are out there job hunting? So what do you think students actually think about this is an issue? Is it very important, important, not important, or irrelevant? Tell us what you think. So that's interesting. So roughly the same sort of percentage in the important bit, but actually what you're saying is that there aren't any students really, well, there's no students again to whom it's irrelevant, but also a smaller number who think that it's not important. So actually what that poll is telling is that that all of you think that actually at the moment this is probably a bit more important to employers than it is to students. Right, so let me go to the next question. So this is a question for those of you that are employers, but also if you're from a university or a supplier organisation, let us know what you think as well. So we're interested to know, did you significantly reduce your team's carbon footprint before COVID-19? Obviously, COVID-19 has had a significant impact on people's carbon footprints. We all know that's been in the news, but we're interested to know is, were you doing anything about this before COVID-19 hit? So did you reduce it significantly, a little bit, or not at all? So tell us what you think. So that surprised me, actually. I thought it would be a smaller percentage on the significantly bit. So what we're saying is a fifth of those on this call reduced their carbon footprint significantly before coronavirus, 45% a little bit, but then actually a relatively significant number, 35%, hadn't reduced it at all. Right, next question. So, have you significantly reduced your carbon footprint as a result of COVID-19? So what's the impact been there? I think we can all guess what this might say, but let's see what you will actually say. Yes, 100% say you significantly reduce your carbon footprint as a result of. It's been a slight change. But the majority by far have significantly reduced their carbon footprint as a result of coronavirus, 90%, whereas 10% have reduced it a little bit. So just a couple more questions to go. So the next question is about actually what happens after we get back to normal from coronavirus. Do you anticipate any reduction bouncing back post-pandemic? So yes, no, or not sure. Let us know what you think is going to happen as we come out of coronavirus. So there we go. So nobody's saying no. That's a good thing. Roughly a third saying they're not sure, but 2/3 are saying yes, they do see a reduction bouncing back post-pandemic. And then the final question, actually, and this is in the round. So this is regardless of COVID, and this is about actually how easy is it to reduce the team's carbon footprint. So is it easy to reduce your team's carbon footprint? Is it difficult, or are you just not sure? So let us know what you think to that question. Okay, so round about the mid to high 40s are saying, 50% now saying it should be easy to reduce your carbon footprint, 20% saying it difficult, and another 30% not sure. So that's just a little straw poll. That's quite interesting. We'll do that again next week to see if the results vary with a slightly different audience. So if I can summarize that, I think that's what's telling us is that this is important to employers. The view of this audience is that it's possibly more important to students at the moment and employers, which says to me there's some catching up for employers to do. But actually, this was an issue that was current before coronavirus, and of course, there's been that impact of coronavirus. But then we've got to think about what we do coming out of this. So that was great. Thanks for that. That's a good little start to get us going. So as I said, we're going to slightly change the agenda. So first of all, I'm going to go to Laura and Andrew to get their view. So first of all, can I go to you, Laura? Can you just tell us a little bit about what the SRA project is about? How did it start and what are its objectives?
Yeah, of course I can. And you're going to hear from the amazing Joe in a while talking about Teach the Future. And I think what I've learned from the work that he's been doing is the need to empower individuals to feel like they can make a change, and actually giving students in Teach the Future's case and recruiters in the Alliance's case tools and confidence and techniques to actually tackle climate change and understanding the role we can all play. So I think the Alliance really had its inception in thinking about how we can come together as a collective industry of early talent professionals to really make a difference when it comes to reducing our carbon footprint. And And Akil and Meg later will talk about the differences between individual change and system change. And it's clear from the poll that recruiters are clearly doing things in this area. But I thought that there was a need to pool our collective efforts into an alliance. And I think that's really important when it comes to measuring impact and encouraging collective action. And that's really why we founded the Sustainable Recruitment Alliance. So in terms of the objectives, in essence, it's about making meaningful steps to reducing our carbon footprint as early talent professionals. The first step would obviously be to get engaged with this as a topic area. Clearly, you're on the webinar, you are engaged. But then the steps that we lay out very clearly with regards to the objective of the Alliance are around 3 R's. So the first, reviewing. So taking the opportunity to actually critically review your attraction, your assessment strategies and policies, and identifying opportunities to make them more sustainable. The second step is really about reducing or replacing previous patterns of behavior or consumption. So looking at doing things differently and reducing perhaps historic practices when it comes to consumption of materials. And then the third most important element is really around this reporting. And I think that's the real challenge. And it's interesting when you ask the question, Stephen, about whether people feel they're making a significant reduction. And I'd actually pose the question, you might think you're taking actions, but have you actually started to quantify those and use credible data sources to actually analyze those reductions? Are you able to commit to doing full audits of that data to actually give you meaningful results around where you're seeing improvements? And I think that's really key. So as part of this movement under the Alliance, we're looking at aggregating the data that we collect from the Alliance members and analysing that to actually come up with an annual impact report about what we're seeing across the industry in terms of carbon reduction.
Fantastic. And so do you think, we talked a bit in the polls around the impact of COVID-19, obviously that has changed our behaviour in lots of ways. Actually, do you see that actually as maybe as an opportunity that we're learning to do things differently, so that actually as we come out of the crisis, we might be able to see even more of an impact that we might have seen otherwise?
I would hope so. And I think it requires us all as early talent professionals to take the time to reflect on what has worked well, not only from a brand perspective, not only from attracting the right talent into our programs, but also saying what should we continue to do when we go back into the new normal in terms of our attraction and selection. I know Andrew's going to touch upon that in a while, but I think one of the key objectives for me personally as we drive the Alliance forward over the next 12 months is about, one, getting more members on board and coming together as a collective to encourage others within our own industries to commit to doing those 3 things of reviewing, reducing and reporting, but also about sharing best practice. And this is absolutely critical over the next 6 to 12 months as we're looking at using more online platforms, using virtual delivery in more effective ways, naturally reducing our paper consumption and our merchandise consumption, not doing as many physical events, so reducing down the impact of travel. And it's about saying, what can we do in terms of sharing best practice? How can we get case studies of really great examples of where things are being done differently and with effect, and sharing that so that people have the confidence when we go back into the new normal of maybe having a blended approach, but maybe being a bit more radical in terms of saying, actually, this is a new way in which we should operate.
Can I think step in there?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, sure. Please do, Andrew.
Yeah, completely agree 100% with what Laura's saying. And it was interesting, Stephen, looking at that poll. Not everybody thinks this is easy. So not everybody is looking at their armory, their attraction armory or their process and going, you know what, I can absolutely slash emissions. So to that end, the Alliance operates, as Laura said, as a support group. So at its best, I think it's going to be a hub where recruiters from all over the country can come and say, what does best practice look like? Where can I find an example of an organisation that's just like my organisation, that have taken steps that have helped with making the carbon footprint smaller? And I think that's going to become increasingly important, because going back to your original question, Stephen, I think, and from some of the conversations with our clients, we have some anecdotal evidence for this, is that the pendulum will swing back. I think post-pandemic, if there is such a thing as post-pandemic, touch wood, I think a lot of recruiters will be under pressure to step further away from the digital platforms, to go back to merchandise, to go back to the old ways of working. And it's up to, I think, organisations such as the Alliance to make sure that those people are helped in their ambition not to let the pendulum swing back too much.
And I think, Stephen, the point.
Oh, go on, Laura.
I was going to say this, the point in the poll about, and I know Akil will come on to this in a while, but in terms of the perceptions of the student audience, so the target audience that we are all trying to appeal to, it's clearly a really important issue. And I hadn't quite, I think, when we started this journey, appreciated how much of what we're doing would resonate with that student audience. And I'll give you a very small example. We created a video this year to document our 7-year journey to become more aware of our carbon footprint. And we produce videos, as you all will, every year, and we would usually see between 5, if we're lucky, 20,000 views of that video over a number of years. Now, this video we put onto our YouTube channel documenting our commitment to the Alliance and our journey over 7 years, in the last 2 months alone, has received 145,000 views. So there is clearly an appetite from the student population for early talent professionals to be within our constraints of what we can control, what we can manage, to be making practical, tangible steps and shouting about that. And I don't think that that's perhaps been on our radar as early talent professionals in the previous campaigns.
I think there's pressure coming from students. There's increasingly pressure coming from careers officers as well, which is, I think, something worth exploring. So I think as recruiters, it's not going to be enough to say it's not important, because it will be important. Because if you're not doing something about it and being seen to be doing something about it, it's not that you'll be missing out on competitive advantage, but you might find yourself a pariah if you're not doing enough. You might find that increasingly students are looking at you and saying, by the way, what are your credentials? And as an organisation and as a recruiter, you're gonna have to hope that your credentials are reasonably positive.
And that's right. And that's what Joe's going to be talking about in terms of the power of the student voice. And if we are ever in a situation where we're back at physical law fairs, I want students to be coming up to us and questioning if we have got anything, which we wouldn't have, if we're using brochures, if we're relying on merchandise that's clearly unnecessary plastic that's been shipped across the world. I want students to be questioning us as recruiters as to why we're still doing that. What's the value of that? And I think we need to be thinking differently as early talent professionals about the value that we are given in our offering to the students. So is it more valuable that we're investing in meaningful development opportunities through virtual internships? I know we've seen some of the big law firms, Linklaters, White & Case, Latham's, organising these amazing virtual internships where students go on and get real value out of doing meaningful internships. Now that surely has to be better than providing them with a yo-yo with your brand on.
I like yo-yos, but I do agree with you. But it is that there's a lot of stuff about merch. About, if you do need merch, make sure it is deeply and utterly sustainable and check your supply chain. But you probably don't need it. There are probably better ways of maintaining your brand and raising your profile without using all this carbon heavy stuff that nobody needs. It just ends up in landfill. It's a terrible thing. So in our conversations at Blackbridge that we've been having with clients, we're talking about sustainable alternatives to merchandising. How do you move to a sustainable model without losing your brand equity? Because I think a lot of recruiters are struggling with that. They're kind of getting rid of stuff, but they don't know what to replace it with, and that's going to hold them back in terms of talent attraction. So we are thinking about things like sustainability. Of if you're going to have a stand, you can have some great sustainable stands. I saw one online the other day for a Canary Wharf company that had been made exclusively with plastic that had been taken out of the wharf. Maybe it's a bit gimmicky, and I'm sure maybe Akil will have something to say, oh yes, but you should. But as far as I'm concerned, in terms of effort and application, that's a real standout effort. So I think there's something about the materials you use, there's something about replacing merchandise with experience, whether that's the experience of an online internship program, or not giving out a leaflet but having a sound shower on your stand that communicates the information in a rather more impressive and compelling way. Things like interactive quiz screens that we've done for KPMG, and also making a digital platform work better. I think in terms of the what's happened in the pandemic, and in terms of the shift towards more sustainable recruitment solutions, people have got a bit lost digitally. People have gone to the lowest common denominator. They've repeated what everybody else is doing, and they haven't thought creatively about how digitally they can really bring their proposition to life. And hopefully that's something that the Alliance will be able to help people with by going online, seeing the case studies, seeing the ideas, making new relationships, talking to people in the same situation that you're in. sralliance.co.uk, sign up as soon as you are able. That's what I say.
And I'll come back to
my ad.
So you can reinforce that message again. Sorry, go on, Laura.
I was just about to say, the way Andrew's talking about that, it genuinely feels exciting. It feels like we're at this brink of being able to have a revolution in what we've always thought was the way things should be done and what's possible. And that's what's so exciting, because I think as we find that new normal, there are going to be so many things that we are able to do differently. And for early talent professionals, that has got to be exciting.
It's not an obligation. It's not an obligation, it's an opportunity. It's a chance for us to step back and say, how can we do this better? Not just better for the environment, but better for our organisations.
Yeah, agreed. And it's interesting that doing it differently. From an ISE point of view, we ummed and ahed for ages about making our magazine digital. Well, there always was a digital copy, but we were resistant because we just knew really people didn't read digital magazines. So what we've done is we've completed a whole different interactive platform on our website. So it's not a digital magazine, it's a totally different way of thinking it. But it means that we're not sending out well over 1,000 sort of magazines every year through the post that we know often got lost in people's internal mail. So I think it's interesting what you said, Andrew, and Laura, you echoed this as well, is there's a danger as we come out of this that I guess is, I mean, a few of us have been through recessions before. We will bounce back, the market will pick up, it will get very competitive between firms again, and there's a danger that people forget about the things they've learned and fall back on some of those old tools in the misbelief that actually having some stuff on a stand might give them some form of competitive advantage. Which we can get back to. I think that's probably a good point to pull in the student voice. So Akil and Joe, you've been nicely from Andrew and Laura. I think it's again, I go back to that poll we did at the start. That's what it's a relatively small sample, but that view is of everybody on this webinar, most people that actually this is a bit more of an important issue for students, and employers need to catch up. So what I'm going to do, Akil, is I'm going to change presenter, and I'm going to make you presenter, which should enable you to share your slides.
Thanks, Stephen. I will just... Right. Can everyone...
Yeah, we got it. I can see that.
Okay. Can everyone see the slides?
Yes.
Great. Okay. My colleague Meg would ordinarily have been with me, but there's a few technical issues. We've got to adjust to a new normal, as everyone says. So yeah, so I'm Akil, and I'm with a student-led charity called SOS-UK. I'll just start with a bit of background because I know some of you may not have heard of us before. So you might have heard of the National Union of Students, or NUS, and last year in October 2019, we formed into a new charity so that we could move further and faster on sustainability. So we are independent and we can work with more people, However, we're still very much linked to the NUS family and have that student voice very much within us. So, for example, on our charity trustee board, we have the NUS president as well as a couple of the other officers. So that's really, really important. As you can see on the slide, these are our kind of three main aims, really. That first one is all about making sure things are student-led. So historically, what we found is that students have been almost seen as passive learners, so that sustainability things are almost done to you and that you can't learn and shape the future at the same time. So we believe that's really important to get students to lead some of the changes as well. The second one is about really making sure that the education system and wider contains sustainability in everything. So previously, you know, within education, sustainability has been linked to kind of science and geography, and even within industry, a lot of it is still within the environmental sector. But we really believe to make meaningful changes, it's got to be applicable to everybody. So from construction to accountancy to law, how can we all contribute to making kind of the really critical sustainability changes everyone needs to see? So it's not just a niche area. And finally, making it more inclusive. So sustainability is one of the least diverse sectors, and we're really keen to be better represented across all sections of society, and we really try and engage students and train them from all backgrounds. So just briefly, before we kind of get onto our data, we've got all sorts of, in terms of our specific work, we have engagement programs, educational programs. So we talked about individual, I know Laura and Andrew talked about individual change and the importance of system change too. So we have behaviour change programs about what students can do on campus, what universities can do, what businesses can do, but also kind of big picture, kind of government level, national, international level stuff like Teach the Future, which we'll hear about more later, or Invest for Change, which is really about how we shape investment and where they go. So this is, we carry out an annual sustainability skills survey, and we've just got some, they're a bit word heavy and we'll send them around after, but it just gives an idea of what's important for students when they consider what jobs to apply for. So as you can see, you know, a good starting salary is important with 85%. However, 72% something that contributes to the development of the local community, and crucially, almost 2/3 want a role that contributes to helping the environment, and also kind of social environmental issues as well. So much more we're hearing is that it's not just about the salary, but actually what is my purpose in life. What we spend a lot of time at work, and actually more students are wanting to make that meaningful when they finish university or college. So this is about what students have to work for employers with positive social environmental credentials. So from left to right is how things have changed over the years. So that 77% that we see on the graph on the left is the most recent. So we can see that over the last 8 or 9 years or so, more and more students are saying that they'd be happy to take a starting annual salary of £1,000 lower than average if it means working with a company with a strong and environmental record. And that's really quite striking. Equally, on the right-hand side, we see over the last 7-8 years, more and more students are actually not willing to work with companies with a poor environmental and social record, and they're actually willing to sacrifice a bit of their salary for that. And that kind of reiterates the message again. Again, we see from left to right, as awareness has increased, as student engagement and mobilisation has increased, more are saying that they are happy to kind of sacrifice the salary and actually really work within companies that are in line with their values. And again, that's kind of reiterated throughout. We can see from the latest survey, over 8,000 students responded to this. So just in terms of some of the qualitative data, so we've just highlighted two there. We hear this a lot in our work, and I'm sure Joe will touch on it too. But we can see students want to promote a fair and tolerant workplace and engage with workforce on decisions in the future. So they want their employers to be doing that. One that cares for its workforce and understands and acknowledges the demands placed upon them and welcomes feedback for positive change. Now, what's quite striking about this is that it's not just about environmentalism. Previously, and I think still in many areas, kind of eco-friendly and environmentalism is seen as a very niche thing that's distinct from other very prevalent social justice issues, whether that's poverty, inequality, so many other things. However, we're finding that students want to marry them up, and actually all of it is important to them. So we have to try and see sustainability holistically, rather than just a kind of siloed thing about less plastic, and realise the impact on human populations as well, especially poorer countries and people in the global south as well, who often bear the brunt. And we're finding more students are becoming more aware and passionate about this. From our kind of the survey from the employer's side, we found that 75% of employers believe that a broad-based sustainability skills gap exists. So actually, you know, more employers want to know more about this, and only 13% of companies kind of believe they can really compete in the sustainable economy. So coming back to system change, yes, companies, it's easier if there is kind of wide national level change with government intervention, of course, as well. However, wherever possible, you know, we call for companies to make as much changes as they can make and reskill themselves in the process, which we are seeing from many kind of leading progressive organisations within the corporate sector as well. Right, that's that bit. I will stop sharing.
Thanks, Akil. That was great. So what do you see the future of your organisation? Because you kind of spun out of the NUS, didn't you? Has that given you sort of more autonomy and actually just a greater ability to focus on this?
Yeah, so being part of NUS, of course, we've got such great engagement with student unions. I mean, that's what NUS is all about. However, being independent, we can actually work with secondary and primary education as well, which we're finding with things like school strikes, and Joe will mention this as well. It's not just people at university who care about this. You know, we're seeing primary school kids like put things in their window now and also getting on the street and striking at school. So we want to make it kind of inclusive across all ages, and we see that potential there. So our work, we see kind of broadening beyond just universities, but also not just about education within formal education, but thinking about how businesses can be educated as well and working with them, and really just across the board. So we've got a new campaign called Invest for Change, which is looking at investments as well. So really thinking about how students can affect other areas of kind of sustainability movement beyond just their formal education and their exams and their studies.
And
Joe,
having worked with sort of...
Sorry, Steve, Joe, have you got anything to add there?
Nothing from me until I get onto my slides, and then I will, introduce each feature.
I've got one more question for you, Akil, and then we'll come over to you, Joe. I was just going to ask you, because obviously this project has brought you into connection with the recruitment side of employers. I mean, from your point of view, what is your biggest ask to those employer members within our organisation to really make a difference here?
So recognising, I think, that students actually really are caring more about sustainability, and for them it's important when they're joining any profession, not just the environmental sector. So how can that induction process, that recruitment process, be made to give the best possible start to candidates? So we've had some great examples from Laura and Andrew already, and I know at the end we'll talk about it, but everything from kind of merchandise to also the experience. What sort of training are they getting? What sort of opportunities are they getting? Yes, they will have their day job and their day role. How can sustainability be embedded within that as well, so they feel that they're kind of, especially those first few years that are very important, and that recruitment process, they feel that they can actually make a difference. That's what I would say. And also that I think previously we've had a lot of, within business and outside, a lot of silo thinking, and seeing the recruitment and the great kind of steps forward that we're seeing with the like Sustainable Recruitment Alliance as a kind of platform to maybe even change other areas of the business as well. So actually we're doing these amazing things in recruitment. Actually, as an organisation, you know, have we thought about reducing our waste? Where our things are coming from? Are we paying workers properly? All these things, and I think recruitment is an opportunity to lead the way there.
Cool, fantastic. Thanks, Akila. We'll come back to you again at the end as well. Right, Joe, you've been heavily segued in here by all our panelists, so let's turn to you. So let me make you panelists now. So you should be able to share your slides with us. Great, so take it away, Joe.
I'm going to reintroduce myself. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yes. To quickly reintroduce myself, because I'm not sure you heard that because I had some connection issues, but I've moved rooms now, so it should be working. Oh, I can see everyone, but not my screen. What happened there?
We've got your slides, Joe. Don't worry, we can see them here. Okay,
cool. Okay, great. So I'm Joe. I am 18 years old. I finished my A-levels didn't do A-levels, but should have been doing A-levels this year, and I am now on a gap year. I work for SOS-UK, working on the Teach the Future campaign, which I think really links into this thing that Akil mentioned at the end. This 13%, only 13% of companies are fully confident they have the skills to compete in a sustainable economy. And it's thinking about that Teach the Future is founded upon, because we recognise that to migrate to a sustainable economy, which is obviously necessary to combat climate change and the ecological crisis, to do that, we need young people to be given the skills that are needed for a sustainable society, and that means that our education has to change. And we recognise that currently our education isn't doing a good enough job of that, because students aren't being prepared to face the effects of climate change, which they will have to, and they're not being taught to understand the solutions. In my experience, as I say, I just finished my A-levels, and I've had very few lessons on climate and environment in my time at school. It's probably less than 10 lessons in total through 14 years of education, despite the fact that this is clearly the most important topic in the world. And a lot of these lessons aren't good as well. The ones that I have had are often inaccurate or out of date. And this problem it's not just me experiencing that. Our surveys have shown that 4% of students feel they don't know a lot about climate change. 4% of students feel they know a lot about climate change, and obviously that should be closer to 90% of students knowing a lot about climate change, or 100% ideally. And then additionally, the problem goes deeper, because 75% of teachers feel they haven't received adequate training to teach students about climate change. And this really shows that a lot more change than just kind of tweaks to the curriculum needs to happen in order to ensure students are leaving education with the understanding and abilities they need for the sustainable jobs of the future. So we can change this, obviously, and that is what Teach the Future is trying to do as a campaign. So I started Teach the Future on the 12th of October 2019, so just under a year ago, with the help of some of the folk at what was just becoming SOS-UK. And at that point, it was just me working on Teach the Future, but I had support of loads of other young people in kind of the school strike movement, and that's how I got into kind of climate activism and campaigning. And since then, since starting as just me a year ago, we're now a team of about 40 volunteers, with several young staff members like myself working the other ones, 1 or 2 days a week around their school. And essentially our aim is to push the government to ensuring that our education becomes much more sustainable, so that we're taught much more about climate change, sustainability, and the environment. So what do we want? We're hoping that students can be taught about climate emergency and ecological crisis, which means how they're caused, what we can do to mitigate them, and what our future lives and jobs are going to look like due to them. We want sustainability and crisis to become key content in all subject areas. This is really key because we don't want climate change and sustainability to continue to be kind of siloed. Like at the moment, they're just in geography, which is optional past like year 9 or something. And even then it's not much, but it's pretty much just in geography, and it's an optional subject, which means that it's perceived by most students as only a geography's issue. But as we know, climate change and sustainability are issues for everyone, and everyone in education, everyone going through education should be able to understand them. So we really don't want it to be siloed. We want everyone, whether they end up becoming a farmer or a builder or a banker, to understand climate change, and therefore we think that climate change and sustainability needs to become key content in all subject areas. And then also we think that educators need to be trained on how to teach about these difficult topics, and they also need the funding and the resources to do this. As well as this, we recognise that the UK needs a workforce which is able to bring us to net zero emissions by 2050, because that is our legal target, and therefore to make us world leaders in sustainable technologies, and therefore vocational skills need to include the green skills to do this, and currently they don't. So that's a really key thing for employment, and particularly in some of the key areas which are needed to decarbonise the economy. And finally, we want all education buildings to be retrofitted to net zero emissions by 2030, or as soon as possible, essentially. I think education buildings should be kind of the front of the queue for retrofitting and decarbonisation, so that we can create kind of green jobs across all of the country, because obviously there are school buildings across all of the country. Also so we can inspire students to live sustainably and give them a kind of glimpse of what a more sustainable future might look like. So that is essentially what Teach the Future is, and what we're asking for. As I said, I think kind of like the reason we exist, the reason why Teach the Future is happening, is because we recognise that to make a more sustainable society, which is what we need young people leaving education with the skills and the knowledge to have more sustainable jobs and live more sustainable lives. And I want to show you some of the things that we've done to try and push for this. So we started off our campaign with a bit of crowdfunding, because obviously we needed the money to get going. We were really successful and had huge support. And then we decided that we really wanted to show legislators and MPs exactly what it is we think needs to change. So we wrote a draft education bill, first education bill written by students, and we got a lawyer to kind of formally write it up in the legal parliamentary language, and it would essentially achieve these asks that I've told you about. So we're demonstrating to our leaders that exactly what we think needs to change to help make our education more sustainable. We've run a parliamentary reception where we presented our bill to loads of MPs and peers, and that was an amazing event, and it was so great to have lots of young people running such a cool event like that. There's some more pictures from that. We got some great press after that as well. And then more recently, or not recently, in July and June and stuff, we were pushing for a green recovery for education, specifically pushing for the government to invest in retrofitting education buildings as part of kind of fiscal stimulus, as part of recovery investment, kind of post-COVID, to help create jobs and reduce emissions. And we weren't completely successful. Obviously, we want every single education building to be retrofitted, and we didn't get that. But after a lot of pushing, we did get somewhere, and there has been several announcements of investment into retrofitting education buildings, which is, it's great to have made that progress. So finally, to finish off, at Teach the Future, we think that with broad climate education, we can equip generations to come with the skills and knowledge needed for the green jobs of the future, and empower every young person to contribute to a more resilient and sustainable society. And that is what we're trying to achieve. done.
That's great, Joe. Thank you very much. It's a shame we're not actually in a lecture hall somewhere or in a conference room. I'm sure you get a big round of applause for that and all the amazing work that you've done to get that off the ground. It's fantastic.
Thank you.
So we've got some time for some questions, and I've had one through from Tessa, and this is quite. First of all, she says what what a great subject, and it's really good that we've got a discussion going on it. Her question, which I think I do hear repeated every now and again, is, and this often comes to light when talking about students, and when it comes to the crunch of applying to that job or getting a job, and it's actually is what are students willing to sacrifice, and how important is this when it comes to that I guess signing on the dotted line for a job offer. Can I ask you that first of all, Joe? What do you think? Would it stop somebody accepting a job? I mean, so this can be slightly controversial. I've done some work with I know of some of the people who've done some work with tobacco companies, and they've often said to me they do not have a problem filling their vacancies. They pay good salaries, and they've got interesting international roles, and people apply to them. Is there a danger that actually the sustainable bit actually doesn't stay as strong a message as it should do?
So I am, as I said, I'm not at university yet, so I'm not quite at that stage of people are kind of leaving university and going into jobs. So I haven't got perfect first-hand experience. I know for me personally, climate and the sustainable impact of an organisation will be key to me getting a job there. But I'm, quite involved in climate change and sustainability, so I'm not kind of the average young person. However, having talked to quite a few young people, like for example, one of my good friends, Peter, he's, he doesn't not care about climate change, but he doesn't really care about climate change that much. He's never been on a climate strike or written to an MP or anything like that. And he wants to go into financing and economics and things like that. And I know through talking to him, when he's looked at the kind of jobs that he might be getting, he has instantly ruled out companies that he associates with having bad environmental impacts or bad social impacts. And as I say, he's not very political. He's not like an activist anyway, but for him, it's really an instantly kind of course, I'm not going to work for them because I don't agree with them. And my job isn't just about earning money, it's about what I do, and I want to have a good impact. And I think that is probably echoed across loads of students, even if they aren't activists or wouldn't call themselves environmentalists. It is really important still, because they want the money to be their money they're making to come from a good and kind of sound company.
Do any other of our panelists had a view on that, on I guess the relative importance of this issue when it comes to actually that crunch time of getting a job?
I think Akil's data was quite stark in terms of presenting that 10-year look at what students were willing to sacrifice financially in terms of weighing up the green credentials of their prospective employer, and actually see, and they're not small sample sizes, looking at 8,000 students being sampled and saying that they're willing to give up £3,000 on their starting salary. I mean, that is significant. That's not something that we can be ignoring.
Also, I agree. I think that data was really compelling. I think sometimes we fall into the trap of thinking that the generations we're addressing as recruiters are all cohesive. They all think and act the same way. That's not the truth. There's always going to be people, if you offer them enough money, will quite happily get a job clubbing seals or chopping down the rainforest. That's just the way it is. But we're talking about a nudge. We're talking about an encroachment of better behavior, more enlightened thinking. I think you're going to have, if you do things the right way, you're going to be fishing in a bigger pool of really talented candidates. But not only are you getting that competitive advantage, you are also doing the right thing. In many ways, I think this issue is a bit like D&I. You don't just do it for competitive advantage. You don't just do it because the market tells you to do it. You do it because you, as an individual, and you, as a representative of the organization, have enough sense and enough soul to know what needs to be done, and you go ahead and you do it.
Yeah, if I can just add, Stephen, I think that's such an important point, because we're going beyond just individuals, like, oh, you went for that job because you wanted the money. It can become very much about individual change, which is, of course, as we've spoken about, very important. but structurally we know what the right thing is to do. We know the science on climate change, we know the science on biodiversity loss, and all the rest of it around social injustices. So the key thing is, when people are leaving university or college or looking for that first job or initial job, they are in a moment of change. And actually that process where they start a new job, the types of values the organisation has, can really then impact not just their professional life, but their personal life as well. We spend a lot of time at work, and actually over a long period of time, these values can affect us and influence us. And again, like Andrew said, it is the right thing as well.
I think it was really interesting listening to Joe talk about how he had seen climate emergency being siloed into certain areas of the curriculum, like geography. And I think if we look at what we're faced with as early talent professionals, you'll traditionally see the client emergency type of issues siloed into your responsible business report. That's where it would all kind of happen. That's where your organisation would report on it. And I think this is certainly the shift for me. It's seeing those issues right at the heart of my recruitment strategies. And I am reviewing and questioning everything I do with that lens of and I hate that phrase, but it's true. It's like, what's the impact on the climate and the legacy that I'm leaving in terms of our carbon footprint? And that's really shifted a lot of our thinking.
And that's great to hear, Laura. I would say actually, I was going to say that's a message for Akil and Joe actually, to push back to a student audience as well, actually, is by making students more activist mindset and demanding of employers that it's not just a glossy bit of CSR literature that is, isn't based on real action. Actually, students want to hear something meaningful out of this. Sorry, Andrew, you were going to say something.
I was going to say something Akil said that made me reach my pencil and write it down in large capital letters, which is something that I think was largely passed me by, is the importance of employers embedding sustainability within the roles they're hiring into. So it's not just a question of recruiting sustainably and assessing sustainably. It's how are you looking at the roles that you're offering to make sure that the that fight towards a more sustainable future is in the role. If I understood you correctly, Akil.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the roles that we offer today are going to be shaped and further enhanced, and in 10, 20 years, they might be the next managers. And actually, what skills are we teaching right now? What skills it might be traditionally, I think, as Laura said, there might be one CSR person or a couple or a small team. Actually, what is the nature of business? We're seeing more social enterprises and other more values-led businesses, cooperatives and the like. Actually, how do we embed that more across the organisation, but still carry on within our own industry as well?
We've got a couple of minutes left. I've got another question pop up, actually. This one's from Chris, and I think this is quite an interesting take, actually. I hadn't thought about it this way. And it's actually, do we know of any employers that are actually expecting the candidates they're hiring, to have some form of commitment to sustainability, to think issues like this are important? I mean, I'm sure there's organisations where this is their field of work, where they expect their hires to be thinking about this. But do we know of any examples yet where employers are expecting their hires to have an interest or a view in issues like this?
We're certainly more curious. We haven't been explicit enough to start changing perhaps some of those structural elements of our assessment process to really dig into the detail. But one of our commitments was to work with GTI. Many of you will be familiar with the Undergraduate of the Year Awards, and we sponsored their Social Impact Award this year, and next year we're turning it into the Young Activist of the Year Award, and we've asked GTI to actually broaden the reach to cover Year 13 students, which is the first time they've ever done that. So actually, the way in which we are more actively seeking candidates that demonstrate this level of activism, campaigning, and can turn that into meaningful change, that's more attractive to us, and we are making attempts to try to find those pools of candidates to attract a Clifford chance.
I think some of our clients, we've seen it in the softer way, in terms of people doing campus outreach and community outreach. It's like, our competition is about how we can use sustainability to change something in the way we do business. But in terms of a rather harder requirement, at the point of application, come to us with evidence that this is something you're engaged with. I haven't seen that. I don't know whether Chris has. It'd be interesting to find out from him or her where that's come from, because I reckon the first employer to get out of the traps with that as part of their employer brand armory is going to do themselves a lot of good.
And they've got to be a pretty good story to tell from that employer to be able to actually have it. It's, you know, so not be accused of.
Yeah, you could justify that, haven't you?
Yeah. We're on the hour, so we've done full time. That's been a really interesting session. Thank you very much, everybody, for sharing your time. Some really insights into both, I guess, what students are thinking and also what employers are doing. And Joe, again, really great piece of work that you're doing. Very impressed to hear about it. Andrew, I promised you one final plug of how employers can get involved. So how do they get involved? What's the website? Oh,
no, you see, I told you before. I know you've forgotten. I think it's sralliance.co.uk. Is it not, Laurie Yates?
Absolutely right. That's what you need to do. It's a very simple pledge. You go on there. If you want any more information, let me know. Spread it to your friends, family, as far and wide as you possibly can.
Yeah,
we're signed up to it. We're supporting it. So absolutely. Fantastic, everybody. Thanks again very much for your help. That's been a really great session. This webinar has been recorded. It will go onto our YouTube platform later today. We'll put some links on there to the work Joe's doing, to the SRA, and also to some of the stuff, the slides that you've had presented. So thank you all very much. Enjoy the rest of the day and talk to you all soon. Thank you all very much.
Thanks, everyone.